Hey guys, welcome back to Release the Craftin. Priscilla here with another episode of Storycraft. And you guys, this one's coming right off the heels of the Goblin Mode challenge. If you haven't checked that out, there is a playlist on my channel that you can check out for the hashtag RTC Goblin Mode, and it was amazing, it was fun, it was splendiferous. And I'm kind of coming off a little bit of a creative high from that. But since we're also currently shamelessly self-promoting, I'm just going to go ahead and plug my Patreon here. If you are interested, you can check that out. It is linked down below. A lot of you guys have expressed interest in seeing the journal that all my goblin stuff is going into. I've been doing a bunch of process videos over there, a lot of craft with me's and stuff. So like, jump over there. There's also witchy shit. It's cool. But that's it. We're moving on, because today I'm going to tell you guys the story of King Thrushbeard. And King Thrushbeard is another Grimm's Brothers tale, because I'm in the mood. So that's what we're doing. And you guys, I hate this story. It makes me mad, and you're gonna see why. I think you'll see why as I tell the tale. I'm not gonna spoil it for you, but I will talk about it at the end. So, our story begins in the way long ago, with a king. No mention of his queen, so we're just assuming mom has died, and he has a beautiful daughter who is, in fact, beautiful, talented in princessy things. You know, she's amazing, except for, you know, just one tiny little flaw. And the flaw, you guys, you might be wondering, what could the flaw possibly be? She's full of herself. That's it. She's so full of herself that she's rude to people when they talk to her, and that makes her, according to some people in the story, the worst. But the problem is, she's of marrying age. The king is trying to marry her off. He thinks maybe if she marries and settles down, you know, has a couple kids, her attitude will chill out and she won't be so haughty and, like, you know, all up and, like, feeling on herself and that kind of stuff. So he decides to call all of the eligible bachelors of the land to come to the throne room so that they can meet the princess and she can pick from the lot of them. So he's not, like, picking for her, which I guess is a cool thing, but he is like, you gotta pick somebody. Here's all the guys, pick someone. So she goes up and down the line of all these men, and she's looking at them, and we're talking like minor nobility all the way up to kings, and they put them in order, like ascending order. So she's starting out with the rabble comparatively, working her way up to the kings that are also eligible. And as she's going through, she's like, this one's too fat, this one's too thin, this one's too crooked, this one's too straight, this one looks like all he does is eat. And she's like absolutely reading them for filth. Like, I can't do it for justice, but she's absolutely reading every single one of these men for filth as she passes them by. She's not just making like slight commentary. She's ripping them a new one, and she gets all the way to the end of the line. So now we're in like high class noble section, the royalties. She's talking to kings now, and she's like, no, disgusting, as she goes through that. And she gets to the last king, the most handsome and youngest of all the men assembled, so someone in her age range. And she goes, look at his chin. He's got a stupid crooked chin like a thrush's beak. So, because she called him out on this, from this day forward, like a childhood nickname, King Thrushbeard was his name forevermore. Everyone called this man King Thrushbeard after she read him for filth in the middle of the throne room, which, you know, had to chap his ass. And by the time she does this, right, she calls out this prince or this king, and her dad is like absolutely flabbergasted. He cannot believe that his daughter is A, so choosy that she would not pick a single man from this lot, but B, so freaking rude that she wouldn't just not pick them, she'd insult every single one regardless of their status. So that he's so mad that he's like, I can't fuck with you anymore. Like, I absolutely cannot fuck with you anymore. So the next beggar that comes to the door, I'm going to marry you off to them. And the princess is like, yeah, okay, whatever, Dad, like, sure. And she goes about her merry business. All the rest of the suitors go home, and they're like, okay, it's done. Like, this is what it is. And a couple of days later, a traveling minstrel comes to the door, and he's like, hey, I got a fiddle, I want to play for the king. And then the king's like, yeah, let that guy in. And he comes in, he plays for the king, he fiddles spectacularly, and the king's like, this is amazing, great show, isn't it, daughter? And she's like, I don't know, I've seen better, but okay. And he's like, yeah, actually, it's so great that for your reward, I'm going to let you, commoner, fiddler, marry my princess daughter. And the fiddler's like, oh, well, I was just here for some coins, but I guess, I guess I'll take her to wife. And the princess is like, what? Say what? Are you serious? Like, for real, for real? And her dad's like, yeah, absolutely. In fact, he was so serious that he had a priest on standby in the royal court, so that he could marry her immediately. And that's what happens. The priest comes out of, like, the curtains, like a little creeper, and he marries the princess to the fiddler. And then the king's like, well, now you're a commoner because you're married to a commoner, so get the fuck out of my castle. And she's like, you can't be serious. And he's like, oh, no, absolutely. Guards, take them away. And they do. They throw her out of the castle. She gets to take none of her gold and jewels, none of her fine gowns. She gets absolutely just kicked right on out of the castle as if she were the rabble, because now she's married to a commoner. So the fiddler takes her by the hand and starts to lead her into the woods, and he's like, come on, I'll take you home, let's go. And she's like bereft, she's crying, she's tearing up. And as they're walking through, they pass through a forest, they pass through a meadow, and she's like, oh my gosh, who does this belong to? It's so lovely here. And he's like, oh, everything you see here belongs to King Thrushbeard. And then she's like, oh my god, I should have married King Thrushbeard. And the fiddler says nothing, and they continue on. And then they pass by a stream, and eventually they pass by this beautiful little town, and she's like, oh my gosh, who do these lands belong to? And he's like, King Thrushbeard. If you had married him, this could have been yours. And she's like, oh my god, I should have married King Thrushbeard. Like, what the fuck was I thinking? Now I'm married to this poor fiddler. So this poor fiddler takes her to his house. And by house, I'm being facetious. We're talking little tiny hut in the woods. So tiny that she has to stoop to get in the door because the door's not big enough for people to just walk through. That's what happens when you're poor, I guess. You can only build your door so tall. Nobody told me about it. I should start shrinking my doors, like, immediately. But anyways, they live in this house. And for a couple of days... That's my cat feeder. For a couple of days, everything goes well, and, like, I think it might be broken. But for a couple of days, everything goes well, and, she's trying to get by. He's trying to make her cook, and she's like, I've never cooked before. And he's like, okay, stupid. I'll do it this time, but you have to learn from me. And he's like, okay, start a fire. She's like, I never started a fire. He's like, okay, stupid. I'll show you this time, but, like, you're going to have to start doing this. And then he's like, okay, we can't afford to live this way on my fiddler salary. So you're going to have to learn a trade. You have to find some kind of skill so that we can make some money. And she's like, okay, like, what do you want me to do? So he goes out into the woods, he cuts down a bunch of willows, like branches, and brings them inside for her to weave a basket. And she can't weave the basket because the willow, like, branches are so rough that they cut apart her little her fragile little hands. So he's like, okay, you can't weave fucking baskets. That's not great. Let's try something else. So he starts her to, like, spinning. He's like, okay, you'll spin thread, but the materials they have are for poor people. So it's not the stuff that she was learning in the castle with her very fine materials. So these also cut apart her hands because it's too rough for her delicate princess fingers. And he's like, all right, so you're fucking useless. Okay, so I'm going to go get some pottery, and then you can sell the pottery at market. Okay, can you handle that? And she's like, well, actually, yeah, I think I can do that. And you guys, she does. She absolutely fucking does. She girl bosses the shit out of the pottery sales. And when they set up their stall, people are just delighted to come see her because she's so beautiful that they're like, oh my gosh, like, you're so pretty. I would love to buy your pottery. And she's like, great, thanks. I'd love to cash in on my pretty privilege. And she does. So much to the point that people are leaving her the money and not even taking the pots. Like, they don't even want the pots. They just want a chance to talk to her because she's so beautiful, right? So she's doing very well. And they're able to live fairly satisfactorily off the money she makes selling crocks and cookware and whatever else you can make pottery with. They're selling this stuff. They're doing very well for themselves, all things considering. They're still poor, but they're not, like, destitute, right? Everything seems to be going along just fine until one day she oversleeps and she doesn't get to the market on time to set up her stall where she usually does. So she's like, all right, well, fuck it, somebody stole my spot. It's okay, it's not like I set up there every day or anything, but all right. So she ends up setting up her stall on the edge of the market, and she thinks everything's going to be fine there because, she's still pretty. People are still going to come see her. Except that some drunk asshole on a horse comes riding through at, like, top speed through the market and rides his horse right through all of the pottery. Not once, guys. Not twice, but 3 times. Just to make sure every piece of pottery is fucking smashed. So now she's like, oh my god, I don't know what to do. I have to go tell my husband. He's going to be mad at me. But, you know, eventually she musters up the courage. She goes home. She tells her husband, like, you won't believe this. Like, this is what happened. And he's like, you're so fucking stupid. Who puts their stall of crockery on the corner edge of the market? What fool would do that? And she's like, I didn't have a choice. Like, I was late. There wasn't an alternative. I had to set up somewhere. And he's like, no, you're an idiot. You're stupid. And don't worry. I've already arranged for you to go take up a service at the king's castle as a kitchen maid because I had a feeling you would do something stupid like this. And she's like, oh my god, okay. I didn't know that you were preparing for me to fuck up at the thing I was doing really well at, but okay. I guess I'll go be a kitchen maid. And she goes to be a kitchen maid at the king's castle. And they give her all the gross jobs, like all the mucking out of things, the scrubbing the dishes, you know, like, I don't know, touching seafood because that's gross. You know, they just give her gross things to do. But she is able to keep 2 little jars inside of her apron that she attaches there with some string. So she has some jars in her pockets, and she gets to keep all the little scraps and extra leftover bits in those jars. And so she's able to take the scraps home for food because she's not really making much as a kitchen maid because the king underpays his kitchen staff. Not cool. But she is able to take home enough food for them to subsist off of. And this goes on for a little bit until it's announced that the king is getting married. And they're having a big celebration for it. And she gets a little bit curious and she wants to go check out what's happening. And so she goes up there and she sort of sneaks her way up there, you know, through the servants' ways so that she can hang on the edge of the door and see all the people coming inside. And she sees all these fancy, like, lords and ladies and, like, various bits of nobility coming into the castle, into the ballroom, she, you know, starts to regret and miss the old days when she was able to wear such fine things, and it makes her very sad, and she gets a little bit embarrassed, and she's like, okay, yeah, I'm just gonna go home, like, this is just depressing me, and I don't want to be around this, but as she turns to leave, one of the men who are walking into the ballroom ends up spotting her and grabs her and is like, oh my gosh, you're so beautiful, you must have a dance with me, and she's like, oh, hell no, I don't want to do that at all, so he starts to drag her into the ballroom in front of all these fancy, richly dressed people who are already starting to chuckle at her because she's the help. And he drags her into the middle of this ballroom, and as he's dragging her, the little strings on her pockets, they come loose, so her jars of food and leftovers fall out of her pockets and crash onto the floor. So not only does everyone see this, like, poor kitchen maid being dragged into the ballroom, and they're already making fun of her for her poor dress, now they're making fun of her because she has little tiny scraps of food in her pocket that just spilled all over the floor. And so she's absolutely red-faced and humiliated. She runs out of the ballroom. And, you know, she manages to make it about halfway down the stairs until she's grabbed again. She's grabbed by the same man. This time she finally gets a real good look at the man. The man is King Thrushbeard. The same guy she made fun of. And he's like, no, hey, like, come with me. Like, we're coming back to the party. And she's like, no, I don't want to fucking go. And he's like, hey, don't you recognize me? It's me, your husband, the fiddler. It's me. I was in disguise. I was pretending to be a fiddler to teach you to be humble. And, you know, to, like, cool your haughty attitude. And since you've been sufficiently humbled and you're definitely, like, a more meager, subservient person now, I'm ready to take you to wife in the castle. So we've been married this whole time. You're married to a king. So, like, come on, let's go. And so she's like, what? Say what? And he calls down some maids to come help her. They take her upstairs, they get her washed, they get her dressed, and they bring her out to the ballroom and present her to the royal court as the new queen. This is the wedding they're celebrating. It's her fucking wedding. And it's not just her there, like, in front of this spectacle of the court. Her father is also there, because it turns out, you guys, that her father and King Thrushbeard came up with this plan, because King Thrushbeard fell in love with her at first sight and decided that he was going to marry her regardless of how shitty her attitude was. So he got together with her dad. They came up with this whole contrived plan to gaslight her into being a different person entirely so that she would be a good wife for him. And he could have, you know, the girl that he wanted, but not as she was. And that's it. That's the end of the story. They live happily ever after. She's a good wife. She never acts up again. The whole moral of the story is basically that women should learn to be, like, meek and humble and subservient to men and not have bad attitudes and not be spoiled princesses. And that is some fucking bullshit. I hate this story so much. I hate that they gaslight her into this, and it works. I hate that it works. But I also hate that, like, this man fell in love with her, immediately upon seeing her. So you know it's entirely superficial, entirely based upon her beauty. And then he didn't care about her personality in the sense that he liked her as a person. He just went, I have to have this object, and so I will change this object to suit my desires, and it will actually work out for me. That's the moral of the tale. I hate this story so much. And when I read the story, like, I thought it was going to be like a cute little story, maybe like a little bit coy, but no. No, it just made me mad, and then I wasn't even going to tell it on the channel, but then I was like, you know what? I'm going to tell it on the channel so that nobody accidentally stumbles across this story and goes, oh, I'm going to read this to my kids, because you shouldn't. It's horrible. But also, on another level of gaslighting, you guys, he wasn't just her beggar husband. He was also the drunk asshole on the horse who ran all over her crockery. So he did that on purpose. He saw that she got there late, saw that she set up on the corner of the market, and was like, you know what? I'm going to teach her a lesson, because for some reason, instead of just being like, hey, this isn't working out, go work for the king, I want to humiliate her and break her down for one final time before I send her to go do some mucking work in the fucking kitchens. So he gets on a horse and he stomps all over her pottery, destroying the things she was good at, so that he can continue to break her down. So, like, that's like the other conceit of this, right? Is that she's doing very well selling the pottery, and could have turned that into like a skill, could have become like a successful businesswoman, you know, actually helped support them and been like more of a contributor to the relationship. All the things that he wanted her to do when she first got to his little ratty hut in the woods, but that wasn't good enough. He had to break down her personality even more, because she couldn't just like chill out and be humble. She also couldn't be successful or accomplished in anything on her own. She has to be entirely reliant on this man who hates her. He hates her. And was so mad that she made fun of him that he came up with this whole plan to ruin her spirit, to absolutely break her. Fucking hate this story. It's not my least favorite story ever of the Grimm's library, but it is. It's the second one. It's number 2. I've already told you number 1, now we're on number 2. So, yeah. That's the story of King Thrushbeard. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And, you know, just hashtag fuck King Thrushbeard, because I hate that guy. I hate that guy so much. He deserved to get made fun of. That's it. That's the end of the story. If you made it to the end of the video, I appreciate your faces. And I will catch you guys all in the next one. Until then, happy crafting. I didn't mean to ramble like that, but here we are, raging against the machine. I will catch you guys next time. Bye!